Okay, good. Today we talk about the grief. Grief. Grief is very important and very misunderstood. So we're going to talk about grief. Grief is when we lose something. Most people think of grief as when they lose someone in their life, like a mother or a child or someone. And so grief is typically thought to be about people. So lots of ceremonies and things, in every culture, religion, spirituality, something is lost. There's a ceremony to heal that. Like a funeral, there's things that are done. In Sikhism, it's done this way. In Islam, it's done that way. The letting go is very well understood, that it's needed. I'm going to tell you a secret, though. Grief is not just about the people you lose. What is grief? Grief is the unraveling of our attachment to something. So if I have a father, I have attachment to him. I connected to him. And when that stops, it leaves these loose ends, and then those loose ends are tied with me, and it's hard. There's a process. That process is helped through ceremonies and prayers and all these things different cultures throughout the world do. But there's an issue. And the issue is actually this, that we become attached to not just people, we become attached to what I call people, places, things, ideas, right? Like a great idea. Fantasy. Fantasy is when we think something is going to be really great. We're going to paint a house, and it's going to take 1 week, 10 days, it's going to be great. And all of a sudden, a month later, it's much bigger than we thought it was. That's a fantasy. We had a fantasy it was going to go one way, it didn't go that way, but we became attached to that. So then we're sad. We go through a process of grief. People, places, things, ideas, fantasy. So I'm just going to give you examples. So most people understand, family, right? Most people understand that. Grief, though, we don't just talk about people, places, things, ideas, families. We need to understand that people can be anyone. It can be friends. You're going to be surprised, but actually it can be enemies too. We can grieve anything. Anyone who's in our life for a long period of time in some way. When they stop being there, we will grieve that attachment. That's what's natural to us. Family, friends, co-workers, right? So people don't think about this. When you change a job, you think about it. You spend 1/3 of your life at work. How can you not become attached to your co-workers? Anyone you spend time with, that's human nature. I spend time with you, I start connecting to you. I start connecting to your smell, your scent, your temperature, your thoughts, your ideas, everything about you, I become connected. The more I spend with you, the more connected we become. And anything you become connected to, it's a process to become connected. It takes time, right? It's a process to let it go. People, places. your childhood home. I meet people, for example, who your place of immigration, where you come from. Lots of people don't think about that. You come from like Nova Scotia, right? In Alberta, a lot of people from Nova Scotia. One plane ride, Nova Scotia is gone. Now it's Alberta. Alberta is different. If you're in India, India is different than Alberta. If you lived there for 20 years, it's gone. You have to grieve the loss. So places of immigration, migration. I meet people who change their homes all the time. They're constantly changing homes. 20 times they moved as a child. Every place they move to, you become attached to. It's a good thing. We're designed that way for a reason, because we get with something, we connect to it, it stabilizes our mind. People who move around all the time in childhood, they don't get to experience that building of connection, so they struggle to make new connections. Things. Lots of things in life. You can get, if you get in, some people, they get into a car crash. They love that car. I remember when I was in university, I loved my car. I have never had a car like that. Honda Civic, 1990 something, Honda Civic hatchback with like manual everything. I had to manually open the window. I would drive that car today, but my family won't let me. But I had to grieve it, because I had spent so many times in that car, med school, other times, driving here and there, you become attached to it. So like your car, things like your home that you live in. I was reading an article about, it's one patient once, she was living somewhere for like 10 years as a renter, and then the landlord needed to sell the place. She was devastated. Even though she didn't own that place, she had lived there long enough that she had a very significant grief reaction. The school you went to, the list goes on and on. Money. I can tell you, I don't make a lot of money running NOM. NOM is not a very good business venture. I'll tell you that. There was a time as a doctor when I made lots of money. Very few expenses. When I made the decision to come to do this, I had to grieve my attachment to that cash flow, that income. Many of you have been employed and now you're not. You become attached. Lifestyle, restaurants, clubs. In addiction, it's not all bad, right? There's good times in some ways, right? So we become attached to things. When we lose those things, we'll feel sad. Ideas. Any immigrant, when they come to Canada, they have an idea in their head that money grows on trees, the government takes care of everything, you don't have to do anything, and it's going to be awesome. Lots of immigrants have that, right? Or their families hold that. That quickly goes away when you come here and the government doesn't do too much for you. It does really important things for you.
Used to do it, but not anymore.
And so the thing is that idea, though, I ran into a person who was like a very highly paid professional in India. She came here and she's like, I'm stuck here. I didn't know it would be like this. And now she's stuck in a process of immigration, so now she's miserable and she's struggling. But one day, she's struggling. Why is she struggling? Because there's a grief reaction. She had an idea, she had a fantasy actually, of how it was going to be. Reality was different. Marriage. We always had fairy tale ideas. Oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. Most people have the fantasy that marriage is going to be like something out of the movies or something like what your parents had. Those are usually the two fantasies people hold about marriage. Is it like that, guys and ladies? No, it's not. It's hard work. It's compromise. And that process is stressful. When reality does not match your fantasy, it creates stress. So the thing is, so what I wanted to help you understand, grief is not just about your parents. It's not just about any of that. It's about anything. Your favorite shirt. I remember someone in my family, I had a shirt that had a really little rip in it. And I loved that shirt, you know. And then one day, my family was like, you need to take that shirt off, you're a doctor. That's not, you shouldn't be wearing ripped clothes. And one day they just tore it. It was very effective, but I was sad. I was actually sad. I had that shirt for like 20 years. So here's the problem. So grief is about people, places, things, ideas, and fantasies. I can make more lists, but it's not just about people. But the systems for setting up grief. Okay, so let's say you lose your job. Is there like a whole community out there at your door started knocking on your, hey, how are you doing? You must be grieving that loss. Is that there? Is there a big church somewhere or a temple or like a big ceremony where, oh, hey, I lost my favorite shirt. Can we do a pot ceremony or something? Is that there? Because people don't realize anything that is the subject of attachment becomes the subject of grief. And so what happens? Okay, let's talk about what happens if we do not grieve. What happens if we don't grieve? We become full of emotion.
So would it be a proper term? Would it be destructive?
It is destructive to not grieve. So what is grief? Grief is the process of letting go. It typically comprises stages. One way of thinking of it is like the stages of grief processing. They look like this. Number one is denial. Denial is like, did they really just rip my shirt? No way. No, not my shirt. Did I really lose that job? No. Did that person really die? No. Maybe they have the wrong number. Maybe they have the wrong person. Maybe that's denial. The second stage, and if this is difficult for you to listen to, then just do some skills, take a pause, stabilize, come back to the video another day, look after yourself. But it's important that you know what this is about, because otherwise your recovery will not be focused on what needs to be focused on. The second stage is bargaining. Oh, maybe if I had done this, you'd be better. Maybe if I hadn't been that way, my marriage would have been gone a bit better. Maybe that's bargaining. And it's called bargaining. Third one you all know very well, that's anger. Gussa, anger. Fourth one is sadness. And the fifth one is acceptance. This is the process that emotions go through to work themselves out to get to the neutrality of acceptance. You think it works exactly like this every time? Does it kind of go back and forth, back and forth? Have you ever seen that? Like you kind of, you're sad, then you're angry, then you're in denial again, you're back, and it's like...
It overlaps.
It overlaps.
Yeah.
So, let me tell you why. This is a big secret. I'm going to spill the beans. And the beans are this, and that is that attachment to anything is not formed in any one way. Attachment, connection, our bodies and our minds do not become connected in one way. It's layered. So at Nam we talk a lot about the onion. Attachments to anything have layers. And I can things, ideas, fantasy. PTIF. PPTIF. Whatever. That's the subject of the attachment. So, interesting. Let's say this is your friend. So, at one level, so you'll have an attachment, right? A connection that'll be, maybe it's to their, the smell of them. You'll have a connection to their, memory one. So you went somewhere with them and had a good time. That's a connection. You'll be connected to them in, maybe it's like some stories. Maybe the sound of the voice. The feeling of hug. The, a memory where you were upset. The job you shared together as kids. The, time when you were living together. What you have to understand, you're not connected in one way. You're connected in hundreds of thousands, millions of ways. And each one of these lines probably has many more lines. And every line, you listen to me carefully, every line is the subject of this. Every single connection, every single memory, every single aspect is the subject of a connection. And if there's a connection, there is grief. If there's grief, there are stages to process and release that emotion. So you can get to acceptance. So, what does that mean? That means there's work to do. That means grief. Some workplaces, I was on a conference call, they were like, oh yeah, there's a grief policy at this workplace. You get 1 day for a grandparent, you get 3 days for your spouse, you get 7 days for your kid. You get These people don't understand the layers of grief. So, why is it important for you to understand this? Think of how many friends in life. Think of how many people, places, things, and ideas, fantasies in life you've lost. How many of them have you gone through this? The answer is not many, not if you're at NAM or any kind of treatment program for mental health or addiction. Most immigrants just don't think about their immigration first 2-3 years. They don't even think about it because it hurts. Most people don't think about the marriage that didn't work out because it hurts. And the more hurt that you have, and you might say, I don't need to grieve that. All I get is pain when I think about that. Let me tell you. I'm going to spill another bean for you. I'm giving you all my secrets. That's why I'm not a good businessman. I should be leaking this out for like $10. $10 a secret, make myself millions. But I'll tell you the secret of how your brain works. So let's say it's a friend or a family member or a job where you learned something really good. The only way, so if you don't grieve something, it becomes the subject of PTSD. Losing it hurts. Thinking about it hurts. So you don't. You stop thinking about it because it hurts. You stop thinking about it because it hurts. That makes sense. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. Except, there are probably some good times. There are probably a lot of good lessons. A lot of good things in that relationship, in that connection. And guess what? Every one of them reminds you of the loss. So what do you think your brain does? Shout it out. What do you think your brain does? It shelves those things. You lose those things. They no longer contribute to your personality as much. So let's say it's a parent that has been lost. They weren't all bad. There's good things too. But let's say you have not grieved the loss and gotten to acceptance. You become avoidant of that memory, and that results in you avoiding all aspects of that person and their contribution to your life. And so not grieving makes you less human. It makes you less complete. And when you're not complete as a human, we were talking about it yesterday, you lead a life of stress. You lost a job because of a foolish decision. It hurts to think about it, so you shelve it all, and you shelve the good lesson that you should have learned too. So what happens when people do this again and again and again in their life? What happens? They become more stressed. They don't learn. People enter their 4th, 5th, 6th marriage, not learning the lessons, repeating the same mistakes, blaming the other person, and life goes downhill. The stress, at some point, you got to sleep. Every immigrant has heard this. Just take two peg. We call it peg. It's a cute name. I don't know why it's called peg, but anyways, take 2 drinks and go to sleep. Forget about it. Wake up tomorrow. Okay, that one, divorce, get a new one. New spouse. Maybe it'll go better, but the same characteristics. And why is that? And I'll tell you the last secret, and that's where we're going to end this. The last secret is, when you get too much PTSD, and I don't care if it meets the criteria for PTSD, I'm not talking about that. When you have too many bad experiences getting attached to people, places, and things, what do you start to do? When there's a new person in front of you, what do you start to do? Any guess?
I would say last thing I want to do would be try to be a friend with that person.
Yes.
They're likely going to kill that person.
Because any person who's had a bad experience will avoid that experience again. So people become afraid to love. They have been hurt. They are afraid to be vulnerable. When they've asked for help before, they've been cut off. They're afraid to ask for help again. And so what we say is, the price of love is grief. If you don't grieve, if you don't let go the loss, your mind won't allow you to attach authentically, deeply, from your heart to anything new. And what business ever did well without investment? What do you think would have happened to Nam if I was like, no, I want to make my money too, and I want to do Nam? Do you think Nam would be what it is today without that investment? And the answer is, it wouldn't. Relationships take time, they take energy, they take investment. They take these essential things. They need that like water for a plant. But if you can't give that because of your many things that are not grieved in your life, then you will fail at those too. And your life will become even more stressful. So, a lot of recovery is really learning to grieve holistically. The longer the more complex the relationship. Remember, you can grieve enemies too. In fact, that's some of the most important grief to do, is the people that have hurt you. If you ever want to lower your stress in life, you must learn how to efficiently grieve. The ceremonies that work for like grieving families, like people who passed away, that same stuff, it really does work for these other things, but you never think to do it. That job that you lost, write it on a piece of paper and say a prayer and burn it. You'll probably grieve a little. Let something go. Let something off your chest. Talk to your buddy about some of the things you've lost. And what will happen is in your head, those little good things will start to surface. They'll start to come up in your mind. Try it. Go and grieve someone that you haven't grieved before. Be safe about it, right? Don't, give yourself, make yourself unstable. And just notice what happens over the next couple of days and weeks. You'll start to have more memories. More of your personality will come back to you. But if you don't do it, it won't be done. And most people that I come in contact to at Nam suffer from complex PTSD, and so their grieving is actually complex. Complex grief is simply grief that's built up a long time from a young age, where there has not been no one has ever shown you how to grieve. A lot of guys get told, and girls these days really, don't cry. Tears are a natural way of grieving. Women have a lower suicide rate than men because they cry easier. And even I've heard, moms telling their daughters not to cry, craziness. These are not productive ways to run a society. Husbands stop their wives from grieving. No, don't cry. Stuff their face full of it. Just don't show weakness, or whatever the heck it is that you've learned. Please stop that. Cry deeply, cry fully, let it out. And you'll find your recovery goes way faster. Tears are a natural part of grieving. And so when you have complex grief, it's not easy to love things. It's not easy to trust. It's not easy to get attached. That process of learning that and doing the grieving that needed to be done is called recovery.
I got a question to that.
And we'll get to the question. So I'm just going to finish. A lot of the NAM videos, we talk about self-therapy. There's, you know what, honest to goodness, grief, you can do it with a therapist. Costs you a lot of money, and sometimes it's necessary. But there is not enough therapy in the world if that is the only way you process grief in your life. You must learn how to process grief. Whatever your culture, your religion, your ways, you must learn, and then you must repetitively practice it. So we say self-therapy. We say connect to self. What's the second one? Connect to others. Others and, what is it? Commit to daily practice. Because ultimately, you can see why we talk about onions at NAM. This is not a small amount. Everyone has to grieve their childhood. That's a given. Things weren't great as a kid. If you're an immigrant, immigration messes up 3 generations. The parents, the immigrants, and their kids. Minimum. So if you're one of those categories, you got lots to grieve. If you don't think you do, you have lots to grieve. If you're anyone, people who think they're fine. Oh, I'm fine. Just a bit of anxiety, depression. The symptom of unprocessed grief is many things. Restless, irritable discontent. That's a quote from AA. That's just a sign that there's stuff that you have left to grieve. Because it takes, if there's a lot, we have to bite it off into little chunks. And that's what you achieve in your daily practice. You connect to yourself. That creates safety. Lots of people, they meditate. I remember I delivered a newborn that actually had passed away in the womb. No. That was not viable. So, i.e., heart was beating, but that kid could not possibly live. I think it was 18 weeks or 20 weeks or something. So they don't live at that age. And as a resident, I was an intern, and I delivered the baby, and my job was basically just to sort of let that pronounce death and let it go. And I did it. I did my job. Lots of doctors just do their job. And I thought I was fine. I thought, no problem whatsoever. Strange situation, but you know what, I'm a doctor, I got through it. About 9 years later, I was meditating, and all of a sudden, it suddenly came back. I felt a lot of shame, but I knew my emotions. I knew it was good. I just let them stay. I felt them. And eventually, the stages of grief played out. It took a few minutes, and then I felt fine. And that memory is in my head now. Before I had put it away. And I learned some good things from that memory. Now that's there too. I'm more of a whole human now. I have more to give. It takes time. So don't waste time. Daily practice. Lots of you have questions. How do I grieve? How do I watch some more videos? Learn some tools. Learn to breathe. Learn. Flash. Flash is one of the most powerful ways to unstuck a process. Learn to be calm. Learn the ways to get calm. Learn your mantras. Do religious ceremonies, do your part, learn. Every one of us has opportunity. That's why I say connect to others. Don't connect around. I'm not saying connect to your drug dealer. But sometimes your drug dealer has something to teach you. I never tell people don't talk to your drug dealer because I don't know, that might be their therapist. It could be that the drug dealer is the only thing standing between them and suicide. I'm not the one to judge. Connect to others who have something to give you, something to teach you, wisdom. Connect to others who can move you forward. Connect to others who you can help move forward and teach, because the teacher learns so much more than the student. Life is really about grieving, so you can keep loving. It doesn't end, and it's good. People ask me all the time, how can you do this job? People are dying, and you give your heart and soul in it. Doesn't that get tiring? I'm attached to all of you. But guess what? I grieve you too when you don't make it. It's because I grieve you that I can continue to offer love and hope and optimism. It's because I know how to grieve. I spend hours in a day working through my system. So all of you can do that too. Start small, little bit, daily Mool Mantra, daily something, and work at it, and don't stop. And you'll find that, maybe it took you 20, 30 years to accumulate this, 40, 50 years, 60 years. But it won't take you that long to process. It won't take you days, though. So I say, sooner than you think, but not as soon as you'd like. In AA, they have the promises. Your life will magically get better before you're halfway through. This is what they're talking about. You start going to meetings, you start talking about things, you start making connections, and you will kickstart a process of grief. You'll unplug stuff, and all of a sudden your brain will come online, more so to the point where your life starts working better. So that is grief. Heavy session. If you're watching this as a video, I encourage you to do some tapping or processing or call someone. If you are here, then we can do something briefly. Before we go, any comments or questions? I know there were comments and questions, but I had to cover the whole of this because there's lots of questions. Lots of questions. Comments. Did you learn something? It's never easy talking about grief. And you know what? Yes, grief goes a lot faster. And this is why we like to work with families at NOM. When a family member says sorry to you for something they did to you, it's like worth 1,000 therapy sessions. It's hard to get to. But if you hurt someone, telling them you're sorry, this happens lots. I said I'm sorry and they got angry. You ever have that? You say sorry and they get angry? And then you get angry that they don't appreciate you're sorry? I want you to understand that in a different way. You say sorry, you kickstart their grieving process, they get angry. And then they start working through this. But you know what will happen? At the end of it, they're likely to come to acceptance. Your relationship is likely to improve. So it's good to say sorry. Especially in Punjabi community. Like somehow if you say sorry, you're like less than people. People will, you're right, I'm wrong. Why we say in the principles, own your 1%, is because when I say that I'm wrong, and I'm sorry, I allow a relationship to move forward. I'm trying to make this real for you. Because this is a big chunk of why people struggle. And then when you've been coping with stress in a bad way, like with alcohol and drugs and gambling and stuff, your brain gets changed. And then that just makes it harder. But once, as you stabilize that, this has to be dealt with or you'll be back into that. So that's why we do holistic recovery. That's why we like to do trauma work. That's why we like to work on these things. That's why 12 Steps is a 12-step program. You know, you need help. No one just grieves in their mind. It takes other people. It takes learning things. So that's grief. Comments? Questions?
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. See, this is the problem. Like, for instance, I can say I can't speak for others. Like, I like the idea how you come out with complex griefs. Yeah. Well, the way I see it is circle of life. What goes around comes around. I get that. Now, here's my thing. For example, I did the 12 program and all that. The one thing I still have a hard time, and I'm still back to go back to it, is resentment. So I'm here when you're trying to do this the right thing. Okay, what's the worst thing as a human being can ever get respected or can be called that? Well, for me, for example, it's 3 words. Word bastard. That's one thing. I cannot stand that. Bastard is the word. The other one is alcoholic. Well, guess what? Just because I had an addiction or whatever you want to put it. Okay, I admit to it, so I'm alcoholic, so I'm drinking. So here I'm doing the right thing by not associating with the people other than being kind, other than being out there. But then you got assholes on the right there, but just because they're driving a BMW, for example. I liked how you use that Civic style. BMW is driving because you're driving a Civic, and this guy's giving you a dirty look, saying, look at you driving that. So as a human being, besides being Muslim, whatever religion, and here you're dealing with number one worse, which is to me is an alcohol.
Yeah.
This guy just got my mind going.
So basically what you're talking about is getting triggered. And you know what? Hey, this is fair. What is a trigger? This is a good question, actually. This is fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that. A trigger is simply a reminder. A trigger equals reminder. Anything that connects you back, it could be a color. Today is Reconciliation Day, nationally, for the indigenous folks, and they wear an orange shirt because the orange shirt reminds them, this one lady, of the orange shirt she had taken away by her residential school teacher. And so she never wore orange for years, decades, until she grieved this, and now she wears orange as a symbol of reconciliation. Triggers. So all those things you talk about are triggers. It's important to understand that when you start grieving things, people around you won't understand.
And how could I be grieving then?
And so you need safety. You need time away. You need to work through your process so that they can't hurt you in a vulnerable time. Because you know what? If the wound is open and you put salt in it, it hurts more. You don't want to open it. Because every time you open it, someone calls you a swear word or something. Reminds you of the stuff you did, but you're trying to change. This is why residential treatment centers exist. It's because we need space. We need time. This is why NAM has gotten into the housing. It's because I know when you're in your family and they're calling you these things, you won't allow yourself to unzip and let out some of the pain. So there's a video I suggest you watch on safety.
So the last thing I'm going to answer, before I forget, sir, self-therapy. Now, for instance, self-therapy, now guess what? Here I'm trying to do the right thing. How could I connect without me not having my guards up already? Because here I'm trying to, for example, this brother, I'm calling him brother. But I'm saying this me approaching him brother. I don't know what this is mine. Yeah. So self-therapy.
So, great question. And I will just, great question. You're wonderful questions. It takes time. There's no magic, because if you haven't been trusting for a long time, if you've been hurt badly, it takes time. Typically, people are in recovery for months to years or decades before they get stable, because it takes time. And that's why we say one day at a time. Do your best one day at a time. Because if you think of the big mountain that you're trying to climb, and you think, oh my goodness, it's a really big mountain, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll just go and drink today. Well, you can pass 30 years of your life that way. So we say, take one step. Next step can wait tomorrow. When tomorrow comes, say, I'm just going to do one step today. And over time, you move forward. Sometimes you may take 12 steps, 10 steps. Other days you might do a kilometer. The more you go, the acceleration of the journey happens. So just stay tuned and wait and learn, my friend. And your time will come. Thank you. Last question.
Yeah, you said each of those layers, they also have layers.
Yes.
Could have, right? Could that be something like, say you value something in your own way, and say your friend whom you trusted or anybody that you trusted, they kind of put it so lightly. What are you doing, you know? That's insignificant.
Yeah.
Over and over again kind of thing, right?
Yes.
Is that what you mean by other layers now, phone layers?
So when you value something, you will develop your own connections. For example, my shirt. My family could not have known that I liked its smell. That I kind of liked this discoloration. That I liked the little rip there. It reminded me of this and that. They could not have known that the little things on the surface were important. And so the thing is, a lot of the reason why the previous question was asked is people don't know what's important to you. They don't. They can't read your mind. So we talk about, communicating that, but even then people will trample over it. So you need safety. Someone comes up to me and says, Dr. Gill, what's this, weird shirt you're wearing, or this or that? I got lots of bullying when I was a kid, about my turban, about my hair, about stuff. 30 years ago, it would have triggered me. I'm like, hey, get in a fight or something. Now, they can say the same thing, but I've worked on myself. And now I say, brother, how can I help you? You seem tense. You seem bothered. And so, when you work on things that are sensitive, one of the things we like to do at NAM is work on triggers. Why? Because the roots of triggers lie in the past. And you don't know where they lie. They can go back way until you were in the womb. Trauma therapy, it's true. And even further back than that, maybe. You don't remember the things that are the start of that trigger. So, but we're getting triggered every day. If you work every day, use flash technique. And desensitize and process a little there. Do your prayers, process a little there. The root of those triggers will get less. And in many areas of your life, those comments won't bother you. So you can go be with that person, and when they throw out that comment, you won't get bothered, and maybe they'll be like, hey, why are you so calm? We say this, hurt people. So anyone saying that stuff to you is hurt themselves. Hurt people. And healed people can heal people. How? Because they'll be like, why are you so calm? What are you doing? Because this would have completely blown you up. Maybe they wanted that. And you're like, hey, how can I help you, brother, sister? And they will start to go on their journey. It's very common that one person in the family comes here and then other family members start to come. Because they just start to heal. And so, there's lots of hope, but it takes time, and initially, if the hurt is bad, it takes safety. Sometimes it means not talking to a mother or a father for a month or two. 6 months, year, 5, 10 years. If they've hurt you so bad that you just triggers your amygdala, you blow up, and you punch someone in the face and you end up in jail, you need to stop talking to that person until you've processed enough that you can do that without drinking and drugging and all the bad things. So there's a video on safety. There's lots to grief, folks. My job here is to tell you an approach so you can understand, so your mind can work on it. Otherwise, you're just lost. You're just like, oh, I'm triggered, I'm bothered, it's him, it's me, and you just, it won't work. But if you understand daily practice, if you understand why, because it's layers upon layers upon layers of things you have not let go. If you understand that you can't love stuff until you leave the old stuff, you will be stuck. But if you understand it, you will become free. So that's where we'll leave it today. Thank you. If I've triggered or misspoken, my sincerest apologies. We must learn, but sometimes it takes a bit of triggering. Do some self-care. You can call NAM if you're struggling, or call your local distress center if you aren't calling from Calgary. And we'll connect again, I'm sure. Thank you.